Working, here we go.
So like 1 minute?
1 minute?
Yeah.
When did the bell ring?
Yeah. It's on my co-box.
No, it's 9:38, guy. It's time to go.
Tommy, get your code box up, man. What you doing?
It's time to go. You get here, code blocks turns on. Okay, so I want a ball with a certain radius, right? I don't know what that radius is yet, but I'm gonna try like 10 maybe pixels. No, 20. No, 10. Let's try 10 and see how big that is. If this will be a good Pong game. That might be a little small. Okay, it's got to bounce around here. I'm gonna have the paddles on the bottom, and let's try 20. That's a good size ball for me right now. Okay. The first thing I want to do is, I don't mind the color green for now. I don't care because I'm going to actually add animation to it. So maybe I get rid of the color altogether. By default, I think it will make it white. Let's check. If you don't specifically say, it does make it white.
Make it black. Make it red. Make it brown.
So that's good. One of the things that we want to do with circle shapes always is set their origin to the center of the ball, because, so that'll be 20 and 20 in the 20, 20. Reason being, if you remember back on lab 11 or whatever, if you have a ball, boy, I want that a little thicker. File new. Don't save. If you have a ball that you're drawing, okay? Hey.
I want the silliest ideas, bro. Why is it saving?
It references it from this. It turns everything into a rectangle because that's the easiest for it to deal with, and then it takes the origin and sets it here. And that's not good for all our math calculations later on. So we want to actually set the origin of the ball to the center. Okay, and if the ball has a radius of 20, then we're going to just push it over 20 in each direction. So that's where this command comes from. Re-anchors. Leave myself a little note. Re-anchors origin. Okay, so you'll see by default that it will draw the circle at 0, 0, which is the top corner of the screen. It's done that. But the center is there. So I'm going to set the position to the middle of the screen. Shape, dot. I've got all these commands. I'm going to write set position. Okay. Yeah, and the middle of my screen is 400 and 300 because the screen is 800 and 600.
Wait, is there like a way, like a word that you could type but then it just middles like the shape rather than having to like create 400 and 300?
You could write, you could get the size of the window and divide it by 2. Window dot get size. Is there a command? Get size. Yeah. And then go dot x divided by 2 if you wanted to. That's, you know, that's, we don't need to do that right now. So there you go. Circle in the middle of the screen. Okay. Good, good. Inside this while loop, after all this events stuff, we're going to get it moving. Shape.move. And I think in the past we would do like 5 pixels by 5 pixels. That will make the thing kind of scoot along the screen. That might be a little too fast, actually. 4 and 4. Let's have a look.
Try 2.
2? That's okay. That would be good for a Pong game, it looks like it. Great. So 4 and 4 look good. And what we would do is actually make these variables that can switch between 4 and -4 so that they can bounce when we need them. So we're going to make 2 variables. X step. We'll also make a second variable called Y step. X step and Y step. This code's going to run 60 times a second. But X step and Y step are going to flip between 4 and -4 as we see fit. How do we control? How do we get it to make a decision if we need it to bounce? Coding, that's always done through an if statement. So we're just going to put an if statement underneath here that says if it gets too high, gets too big, if shape's position, so is there a get position command on shape?
There is.
Shape.getPosition. You can see that it tells you the type it is. Get position. It says it's a vector 2f. That means it's a 2D number, so it has an x and a y. So if I want the x, I say dot x. If I want the y, I say dot y. Okay. Now, my screen is 800 in the x, but my radius is 20. So I'm going to go, if it's ever bigger than 800 minus 20, because that's my radius, then I want to change my x step. So I could say, oh, just let x step equal minus 4. And that will bounce it. But I'm actually going to say, let x step equal minus x step. That's just going to change the direction. And I could say minus 4 and it would still work, but if I go to change my speed ever in my game, when I'm at a power up or something and all of a sudden x step's going to get a little faster, this would still say minus 4 here, even though I want to change the speed to 10. So if I say x step equals minus x step, it will code it in there that whatever my speed is, it should just flip the direction. Okay, great. Now I'm going to do an else if in here. And I'm going to copy all this code. I'm actually going to copy, I'm going to copy this code. But I'm going to say, is the x position ever less than 0? So that's the left side of the screen. I'll say 0 plus 20 because my radius is 20. And then I can go later on and maybe I can make this a variable if I want to. My ball's going to change size.
Please excuse this interruption. Any grade 12 students who are graduating, who are planning to apply to or attend Western University, we are ready now in the auditorium for the presentation. Does any grade 12 graduating student planning to apply
You're not
to
ready.
or attend
Yeah.
Western University, please go to the auditorium now.
What?
Can I go to the auditorium? I want to see after.
No, not right now.
Are you serious right now?
I'm also going to add if statements for my y values, guys. So I'll say if the y position is ever greater than 600 minus 20, change the y step. And here I'll do y step and y step. So let's see if that works. There's probably a mistake somewhere in there, but
Wait, we're doing 600 minus 20 because like this.
the radius is
circle,
20 of the ball, yeah. Look, it actually bounces nicely. Okay, so I didn't make a mistake, I got lucky there, but most of the time you'll code all that and like something will not work, I promise you. It's best to code like a few lines at a time and run them. Actually, let me see if it bounces off the top. No, it does a good job. Great, so there we go. Those are the 4 if statements that make my ball bounce. Take a minute to figure out that. I'll pause our so, goal is ball bouncing. If you can't get the ball bouncing, you're going to have to watch my video and work through it. Yes?
Can I use the washroom?
Go ahead, yeah. Okay, there's the ball bouncing. Nothing to that right now. So now I'm going to add a rectangle shape into this project. And it's not going to be in the shape of a paddle yet. I might just add it close to the middle of my screen.
That's incredible.
Okay, so circle shape draws a circle, rectangle shape draws a rectangle. Now, I'm going to call this P1. Doesn't matter what you call it, but you know we're going to have 2 paddles in this game, so we might as well add P1 for now. And there's a bunch of stuff I have to give this too. Like when I make the circle shape, I set its radius, origin, position. Same with P1, except I have to, let's see all the set commands I have available to me. I have a set fill color, but I'm not going to do that one. I think it'll be white for now. Set origin, you don't need to set an origin for rectangles. Rectangles are good if they are referenced from the top left corner. Circles are not, but rectangles are fine that way. So I don't need to set the origin. I do need to give it a size though, because by default it'll be 0, 0 and it won't draw it. Where's my set size? Right there. Cool. It tells me in blue what it's looking for. Don't worry about that const word or that ampersand sign. Okay? What it's looking for is a variable type called vector2f. That's a two-dimensional number, so I'm going to write vector2f. And then in brackets, I'm going to give it the two numbers I want for the size of it. I think for now, a good size might be like 80 by 80. It's going to be a square for now. Maybe 100 by 100. Let's try it. Let's make it a little bigger. 120 by 120. See what that looks like. And the last thing I have to do for now is just draw it. So I'm going to go down to my draw commands here. I'm going to make a window.draw. You can see all the commands you can do to window. You can close it, you can create one, you can capture it, you can get its settings, get its position, get its view. For the most part, we only ever call .draw. P1. There we go. Rectangle. To draw a rectangle up there. Hey, by default, it set it to 0, 0. And look, the origin was the top left corner, so that's where it put it. Let's move it over a touch.
You go up.
Just a tad bit, sir.
Yes.
Wait, what did
Whatever you said.
you put in the brackets for the window graph?
P1, the name of my rectangle. Yep. So let's go P1.setPosition. All of these shapes will all have a position command. This one I don't need to write vector2f. I can, and then give it the two numbers, or I can just write an x and a y. So I like to just write x and y for that one. I'm going to put it, I don't want it to start at the same, I don't want it to be, the ball to be on top of it. The ball's starting right in the middle of the screen. So I'm going to write like maybe 200 in the x and 400 in the y. Let me see if that draws it and the ball's not on top of it, because I want to find out if they're hitting each other. Yeah, so they're starting there. That's great. Okay, so it obviously just goes right through it. I don't have any code in there to say like, oh, is this thing hitting it? If it is, don't, you know. So there we go. So what I'll do is, if you look on the assignment website, there are two functions here. Or it's also in the Google Classroom, I think I posted them too. There's two functions. So we're going to make our own functions, but somebody already wrote them for you. That person was me. I'm going to copy these two functions. One's called clamp, and the other's called check collision. So let's copy them. If we ever want to add a function to our program, we do it outside of the main, right? So, and you could actually put them in a separate file to clean your code up, but I'm just going to put them outside of my main here. I don't even really care all this code. It's just math. It's just crazy math. But I'm going to read about it a little bit. And then there's this clamp one as well. A function that limits value to the range min max. Okay. Apparently clamp gets used inside of this check collision function. This is the command I want. So it is an integer function that takes in a rectangle and a circle. I have a rectangle and I have a circle, so I can pass those in. And it returns 3 if they hit at the corner, 2 if they hit at the top or bottom, 1 if they hit to the left or right on the square, and 0 if they don't hit. So it's called check collision. So let me just go and use that command somewhere in my code. For now, I'm just going to cout it. So I'm going to write cout. I'm going to write the word check collision. I can see that it exists. It's telling me the two things it needs. It needs the name of a rectangle shape. I have a rectangle shape. It's called P1. And it needs the name of a circle shape. I have a circle shape. Mine's called shape. So let's see if it spits out the number 0 when they're not hitting, and like numbers if they are hitting. Let's see. So it's saying 0 the whole time. If I hit the side, oh, did you see some numbers pop up there?
No.
I saw some stuttering. So
See that? See how it said like 3? It must have hit the corner, then the side, then the top. So this function is working. Apparently it's working. I don't really understand the math. Maybe you don't need to understand the math. It does tell you how it works. It's just a geometry thing. Just checks basically if the, what it does is, let's see here. If you have a circle, it checks the distance from the circle to the closest point of a rectangle, okay? If that distance is ever less than the radius of the ball, then you know that the rectangle is inside of the circle, okay? But, fine. We have a function. This is the beauty of the function. You don't care about any of this code. All you need to know is if you put in a rectangle in a circle, it spits out the number 0, 1, 2, or 3. It's a black box that tells you if it's hitting or not. So this is great. We can use this information to our advantage. Let's use it in an if statement. So let's say if check collision. So we're just going to give it the two things again. If it's ever, what's the number if it hits the left or right? If it hits the left or the right, it prints out the number 1. Okay. So if it ever equals 1, I just want to bounce my ball in the x direction. Okay. How do I bounce a ball in the x direction? With this line of code right here. I simply say change the direction of my x step. Okay. Now I'm going to do an else if, so I'm just going to copy and paste all this stuff. I'm going to write else if it's ever 2. I want to bounce it in the y direction because I know that it prints out 2 if it hits on the top or the bottom. It says it right here. Okay? So if it's ever 2, I want to bounce it in the y direction. And lastly, if it's ever 3, I want to bounce both because it's hitting the corner. So I want to bounce it in the y and the x to get it off the corner. It just gets rid of some glitches that when you hit the corner, it doesn't know like if it hits the left or the right because it's actually hitting both at the same time. So these 3 if statements here should be able to bounce my ball every time it touches that rectangle shape. Solely through the power of this function that I made called check collision. Okay, let's try it. Let's see if it bounces off the rectangle. Not going to be perfect, but it'll be pretty good. It's not going to be like physics. Hello? Yes. Okay, last step. I'm going to move this rectangle shape with my keyboard. So the command to do that is if the keyboard is pressed, is key pressed, right? And then I'll just pick a key. So keyboard : : I like AWSD because I'm a gamer. All right. I'm a big gamer. And if I press A, I want it to move to the left. Yep. So P1 is the one I want to move. And it'll have to move. Maybe we'll try -2 in the x direction. We don't want it to go faster than the ball because then we can run into issues where the rectangle overtakes the ball and our collision won't work. Talk about that later. We will run into a few glitches here and there that we'll have to work out later. If I press D, I want it to move 2 to the right. Let's just try that for now and see if that rectangle will move and still bounce. Whoa. Crazy. Oh! I moved it into the ball and it messed up a little bit. Okay. The ball did not have a chance to bounce before I moved the paddle into it. We don't really have to worry about that with Pong because we're not going to be running into the side of the paddle, but hopefully. Yeah, same. Or scratch, yeah. It's because we don't have like a physics. It's not really a physics simulation, right? It's kind of just like if this position is over here, move it. But there's lots that can go wrong. In physics, you would have forces and say, well, this thing could never go inside of here, so make sure it doesn't. But for now, you know, it's grade 11 introductory computers. We don't really want to start thinking about how forces in the real world interacts with things and why two things could never go through each other. Do you know what force that is? Why do two solid objects never go through one another? Have you ever heard of the strong nuclear force? Yeah. Actually, it's more I think it's more electromagnetic, right? Because two protons will repel each other like insanely, so that's why your hand won't go through the wall.
But sir,
Quantum mechanics says it can if there's a probability it can. There's a probability that anything can happen, right? The reason why the sun doesn't burn up, because the sun is all hydrogen, right? And it takes 4 hydrogens to touch each other to become helium. If that were easy to do, the sun would have burned up in 5 minutes. But it's actually literally impossible for 4 hydrogens to come along and touch and become helium and release energy. However, there is like a 1 in a 5 quadrillion chance, less than winning the Powerball lottery, that those 4 will touch. But because there's so many in the sun, so many hydrogen atoms, enough touch to keep the heat going. Isn't that crazy? You're just alive right now because of probability, guys.
sir, I got a question.
Okay?
Sir,
What?
say that I want to like collide my square with a ball.
Yeah?
How would I do it without